Welcome to the Hockey Writers Prospect Corner, a show with our top prospects writing crew, bringing you the latest news, analysis, scouting reports, mocks, rankings, and much more. From the World Juniors to the NHL draft floor, from the farm to the NHL, our team covers everything that happens in the world of prospects. So sit back, grab a notebook, and get ready for Prospect Corner.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Prospect Corner presented by the Hockey Writers here. I'm your host, Matthew Zator, and once again, I'm joined by my co-host, Baracchini and Devin Little. You know, guys, we're deep in the playoffs already. I mean, in the NHL playoffs here and the CHL playoffs, which we're going to be talking about on this episode. Also, a big part of this episode will be NHL Central Scouting's final rankings were released a couple days ago, I believe it was. And, you know, there's some surprises, I want to say. I mean, we're going to go into that. Some risers and a big faller, which I think, you know, if you've followed, you know, the draft and stuff like that, you know who we're going to be talking about, I think. So before we get going, I just want to let everyone know this week's show is being brought to you by the Hockey Writers Sports Betting Guide, brand new source for your daily sports odds, lines, props, and futures, as well as some daily fantasy strategies and analysis. Make sure you're following THW Bets on Twitter and Facebook to get the latest on everything sports betting. Also, if you do decide to bet, please do so responsibly. If you or anyone you know has a problem with gambling, please check out the resources in the description below. Well, let's jump into this. We're going to be we'll start with the final rankings the NHL Central Scouting released just before the draft here, which is about a month, almost 2 months still. A little less than 2 months now to the draft. So, Peter, you release your, I don't think it's your final ones. You're probably going to throw one more probably after the scouting combine at the end of June. And that's when I'll be releasing. I'm thinking I'm going to release mine around then, my final ones, and we'll see how that all goes. But, you know, it's exciting. The draft is again, we're pumping out the profiles as well. Over the last few days, we've been getting at least 2 a day. So definitely keep an eye out on the Hockey Writers. There's going to be a lot of profiles that at least 2, maybe even 3 coming out every day. And so lots of stuff, lots of content coming on the Hockey Writers. So let's dive into this. You know, let's start with the big one, Frank Nazar. He dropped quite a bit from the midseason rankings. Peter, we'll start with you. Why do you think NHL Central Scouting kind of soured on him, has dropped him off a bit?
Yeah, I mean, if we all thought that 17 was too low, him dropping at 21, I think is still kind of crazy at this point. Like, I wouldn't expect him to rise or maybe even just maintain his position. Maybe even, you know, move up a spot or two, maybe top 15. But I really don't have an answer. I mean, I guess maybe not to say that he was overshadowed at the U18s. I mean, let's face it, he had, you know, 9 points in 6 games because, you know, Team USA was just absolutely dominant. And shout out to my Team Canada prediction. That went really, really well. Yeah, I mean, you know, he's still got the flashy skill set, the hands, the speed, the awareness, the drive. I don't see any reason why he was able to drop. I mean, if anything, he should have just been able to stay stagnant, stay at the same spot, but to see him drop a little bit more, I don't know. I really don't have an answer because I guess you could agree that most of the scouts out there and even some of those that are like at other outlets love Frank Nazar with the speed and pace that he plays with. So, granted, that is Central Scouting's opinion. I mean, we all have our takes, we all have our views, and that's what they see. But for me, Nazar is still, you know, I mean, he dropped a bit for me, but you know, he's still in that top 20 range, maybe not creeping on the door of top 10, but he's still a valuable player within that range. And if he's going to be dropping to like the later part of the first round, I mean, it's going to be a real steal for a team right there.
Yeah. Well, I know I had him in my top, I can't remember now. It was a top 15 or something. I'm pretty sure it was pretty high. I believe he was in my top 10, actually. So, I mean, you know, he's a guy that's, like you said, he's super skilled. He had a really great showing at the under 18s. I don't know what Central Scouting saw that would warrant even I guess it wasn't a massive drop. I kind of maybe over exaggerated.
Mm-hmm. It's just he continues to drop.
Yeah.
But continuing to drop is I think the big question of why. And from the first one to the next one to this one, he's been falling, which is interesting to me, especially when I don't think he's really done anything to warrant falling at all. At least he should have maintained. Devin, do you have any idea why, or is flabbergasted as both of us here?
Well, I'm certainly as flabbergasted. I think that I think there's probably something to his lack of size that probably goes into it, as ridiculous as that is. Yeah. And mind you, there are players ahead of him who are of a similar size, so that can't be the reason why. But I do think that probably accounts for something. And with that in mind, I do want to throw out really quickly that back in 2016, a player by the name of Alex DeBrincat was ranked 21st in Central Scouting's final rankings. And where is Frank Nazar? 21st. So I guess what I'm saying here is that this is not the end all be all for Frank Nazar. I think he has the potential to, you said he's probably in your top 10. I don't think that's a crazy thought at all. I think that Frank Nazar is a really talented prospect. And if he ends up dropping in the first round to where a contender can pick him up, there's going to be a lot of teams who are going to be kicking themselves down the line.
Cue the conspiracy theories right there.
Yeah, right. Well, you look at where Alex DeBrincat is now. 30-40 goal scorer, pretty consistent goal scorer in the NHL. So, and he went in the second round. So a team can get him and towards the end of the first, and I don't think he'll drop into the second at all. But, a team's going to get, I don't want to say steal, but they're going to get a super skilled player wherever, if he drops that far, which I don't think he will. I think a team will probably pick him in the top 20 or something like that. So we'll see when that happens. And but it's going to be fun to see where he actually falls on draft day. Let's talk about some other fallers. Devin, we'll start with you. I mean, there's a few other guys that have fallen on this list. And let's start with the North American side. Do you see anyone else that kind of fell on first glance here?
Well, I'm going to jump on the one that kind of jumped out to me. And I know that, Matt, you probably have some thoughts on this one. Denton Mateychuk dropped a little bit, went from a top 10 to now 14. So it's not a drastic drop by any means, but it is a drop. And this is I'm finding out a very polarizing prospect in this this class. Yes. Some people really, really like him, and some people have their gripes with him. And I think that both sides are valid. And I think what jumps out at me about the drop is that I think you're seeing kind of a product of the fact that people are kind of torn on what he actually is. I think that, he's still ranked ahead of guys like Frank Nazar, and I think that speaks volumes. But there is something to the fact that he's not a top 10, he's not ranked in the top 10 anymore. I think he's another guy that the further he falls, if he falls, the more teams are going to look back and realize they made a mistake. But I get it. To make my final point here, I get it. I get why he dropped a little bit. But I'm not as confused by where he's at as I am with Frank Nazar.
Yeah, you know what? It's like, I do have thoughts on Denton Mateychuk dropping. I mean, and Will was talking about him that he'd pick Korchinski over him. I get it. I do understand. I mean, Korchinski is he's an amazing prospect and an amazing defense. He's probably going to be an amazing defense when he gets here to the NHL. But I think Mateychuk's going to be a heck of a defenseman too. And it's nothing again. Like, I get where Will was coming from. He's a lot of offense. He maybe sometimes doesn't think of the defensive side, but you can teach. Like I said, you can teach defense. Yep. Offense, that offensive ability, you can maybe refine it, but if you don't have it, you're not going to all of a sudden develop that type of skill. So I think for me, if I was a general manager, I'd pick a guy like that and develop his defensive game, than picking a guy that has a strong defensive game, but not much of an offensive game. So, that's my opinion on it, but everyone has, and that's what I love about prospects. Everyone has their opinion. They're all valid. They're all, they're all things that can be looked at as being, true. So I love Mateychuk, as you can tell. So Peter, we'll go to you. Anyone else that you see that fell that on these rankings here?
Yeah, and I'm going to say Jack Hughes. And again, no, not the New Jersey Devils elite centerman right now. But yeah, I mean, he was ranked 7th at the midterm. And I think he fell to a range where I think it's a little bit more suitable for him. Ended at 20s, 30s, maybe beat projects as a mid to late second, possibly early third, depending on what they see. Because for what I saw, he's a really steady playmaker, very solid, great awareness and vision, but it just wasn't game breaking for me. It didn't warrant the ability to be a top 10 player, where we talked about it extensively, where who we thought should have been in the top 10 before with the midterms. And now we're doing the same thing right now, but you're seeing that players that should be in the top 10 are worthy of being in the top 10. And just Hughes wasn't quite at that range. Still a great playmaker, great centerman. He's got the size. And again, I mentioned his playmaking hands and the awareness. It just maybe the consistency wasn't where it was at. Then again, freshman season, think maybe not necessarily the hype, but everything caught up to him, and maybe it just put a bit of a damper on it. But I thought that this was more of a fair ranking for him this time around than it was with him being at 7th overall.
Yeah, I agree. I think we definitely talked about that, Jack Hughes being higher than he should have been. I know Greg was one that mentioned that on that episode. So, he's now kind of put in the range where I think he probably deserves to be at. He's still a skilled player. Like Will, I think, mentioned him last episode too. So definitely check out that. And, the Devils would be funny if they picked him. And then
that'll be difficult because you have Jack, and Luke, so you're gonna have 3 Hughes on that team. So
only 2 of them are related.
2 of them are. But it's going to be interesting to see where he goes to. Let's go to guys that maybe should have fallen that didn't. Peter, we'll go with you on this to start. Is there anyone on this list that should have dropped off, but NHL Central Scouting saw fit to kind of keep them where they were, or rose them up?
I still seeing Connor Geekie as a top 5 player. And again, this is what they see. I mean, we see things differently. I mean, that's all right. That's the beauty, like you said, that's the beauty about prospects and scouting. It's just that he has the speed and the hands, but maybe the consistency overall just isn't quite there for him to be a top 5 pick. I mean, I would have preferred to maybe have kept Pavel Mateychuk there. I mean, Isaac Howard played extremely well to warrant maybe top 5 consideration. Korchinski as well, Delo Blues. Maybe still a bit too high in top 10, but then again, hey, he's being classified as a first rounder for a reason because of the strides that he took with his development, especially his skating. But yeah, I thought maybe him specifically, he only dropped 1 spot, but it's still maybe top 5 is maybe not necessarily a stretch, but maybe I just wouldn't put him there. Maybe latter end of the top 10, close to like maybe 15 range for me, but then again, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, Connor Geekie's a polarizing guy. We talked about him last episode too. So he's the guy that's going to be talked about, see where he goes, because it's going to be interesting to see what team thinks where he falls. Devin, you have anyone in the North American list that you can see that should have fallen but never did?
Yeah. So the player I was going to talk about was Geekie for all the same reasons, and it seems like I am Geekie's least biggest fan at this point. That's not the case. I want to make that clear. And the reason why I would go with him is because the further down you get on this list, the more you're starting to split hairs on where people should or shouldn't be. Yeah. And I'm not going to split hairs on the show. I think that where you're looking at players maybe should or shouldn't have fallen is in that top 15, top 20 range. And I think aside from Geekie, you're looking at players who rose that should have rose. And aside from Frank Nazar, that's pretty much the story here, is people kind of sliding into where they should be. So for me, it was Geekie. And I wasn't expecting him to fall super far, but to still see him at 5, just dropping 1 is like, okay, really? You think he's better than all these other guys? Okay, I'll say what you will.
Yeah, it's well, again, I mean, Connor Geekie he's a talented player. He's going to be a guy that's going to make it to the NHL one day. But I mean, where he is maybe a little high at this point, and there are other guys I think that should be higher. But again, what you said about splitting hairs. I mean, we probably are in the range where he is. I think guys that flip flop around, and that's what kind of happened in the top 10. There was guys moving 1 or 2 spots, and that's what seemed to happen. Let's move over to the European side, and we saw Slafkovsky. Obviously, he moved to number 1. I mean, that was probably something that was going to happen. Joachim Kemell just dropped to 2. I mean, that's not a huge drop.
It's a shocker.
So there's a shocking drop to 1 spot. You're looking at a guy like Simon Nemec went up as well. So, and that's to be expected. Was there anyone that fell that you guys, kind of caught your eye here before we get to the risers on both sides to finish off this discussion? Devin, anyone here that fell that other than Kemell, which is not a huge guys that noticeably fell?
So Brad Lambert was the one who jumped out. And I feel like that's kind of just indicative of what the overall conversation around him is right now. He's still top 10. So, we're not writing him off by any means, but he was top 5 last time around. So to go from top 5 to top 10, that is significant. I still firmly believe that the further down he falls, the more value he's going to have. And he could easily become one of those guys that you go, I can't believe he fell that far. And another guy who did fall, but I'm honestly a little surprised that he didn't fall more, was Ivan Miroshnichenko.
Yes.
He's at 11, and based on skill, I honestly agree. But there's a lot more things at play here than just his skill level. So I would not have, I guess I would have understood it if he fell a lot further down the list than he did. So as much as we're going to drag Central Scouting through the mud for the Nazar thing, I'm not going to drag them through the mud for this, because he does not deserve the stigma that would come with that kind of drop.
Yeah. Miroshnichenko, I think that's what they're looking at, that it's not his fault. It's that it's not indicative of his skill level, and that's what they're looking at. It's that a team will probably draft him in this range first round, but I mean, it's not in his doing of his skill level of why he's not playing right now. So Peter, you have anyone that you kind of see that we're falling in this list from the midterm?
I mean, fully agree with both Lambert and Miroshnichenko, especially, with Miroshnichenko's diagnosis. I mean, I expected him to maybe fall further down, but maybe they're saying, hey, maybe they're not thrown off by the diagnosis because he can recover. And like you said, Devin, the skill set is already there. It's already evident that he was, a top 10 prospect on the European side. But I'm going to go with Alexander Perevalov. I mean, this is a player that I saw that I really kind of like. He plays on his off wing quite a lot. And, at times I saw the skill set, I saw the dynamicism, the ability to carry the puck and, play with great speed. But the consistency factor, and again, I talk about consistency all the time with some players, but he maybe like there were times where he was just trying to do too much. Nothing was going for him. Just seemed to struggle at times later on, and seeing him play a little bit more. But that was just my take on him. And he's fallen quite a bit around the circle as well, with some people putting out their rankings. And, I guess maybe I can understand. I mean, not a massive drop, but for me, like I had him as a late first. He probably's fallen into that second round range back to where I initially had him, because maybe he's not being as dynamic as he once was. So that for me is just one name that I took note of.
Yeah, that's a good point on Perevalov. I was looking at Calle Odelius. I mean, yes, he only dropped 3 spots, but I don't think it warrants even a drop. He's been really good. I don't think he's been bad, to drop even a few spots. The same thing with Nazar. Why is he dropping? Maybe it's because other guys are rising. I mean, that's just the nature of things. When guys rise, someone has to drop. So maybe that's just the product of that, but I don't like that he dropped. So
I know I don't.
So but again, he won't drop in my rankings. He'll probably stay relatively around the same spot when I get them out, unless something happens. I don't think much will, because there's not much they have to do in the next few months, as the World Juniors are after the draft. So let's move to guys that should have fallen, but that didn't here. I mean, who did I start last? I'll go with Peter here on this one. Who should have fallen in this list?
Well, he was a riser, but I didn't think he really should have risen up to number 12, and that was Elias Salomonsson. Again, this is a player that's been very, not controversial in the sense that, there's other things happening. It's just his play has just been off. I mean, he's really dynamic with the offensive side, but defensively, he can get caught. He can get thrown out of position. He can be a little bit over aggressive with his pinches and his decision making. And I really don't think that he's, not, and again, probably splitting hairs here, but to see him that high up and jump up, almost 10 spots, that really is something. I mean, yeah, he's got, and again, you probably can't teach defense, like you said before, kind of similar to Denton Mateychuk. He's got the offensive game down, but if you're going to be a defense, you got to learn how to play that position as well, because you're a defenseman for a reason. To me, I think he just sticks out quite a bit defensively. He still needs to work on that. But then again, if a team's willing to take a swing on him and can work with him, absolutely, then it's going to be work out in the end. But for now, I think maybe that may just be a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, he probably shouldn't have moved. He probably maybe just stayed where he was.
Yeah.
Devin, you have anyone that kind of stood out before we get to the fun stuff, the guys that rose up?
Yeah, and this is a guy I don't think should have dropped a ton, but I was surprised to see him hold steady at number 4, and that's David Jiricek. Jiricek is a good one of the top prospects available in this class.
Yeah.
But to see some of the names that he's ranked ahead of right now, I think that there's a lot of room for debate. I see him ahead of a guy like Jonathan Lekkerimäki, and I go, I see him ahead of a guy like Liam Ogren, and I go, maybe there's some debate there too. Like I said, Jiricek is a really good prospect. I'm not trying to take anything away from him. If he dropped, I would have figured 3 or 4 spots, so not a ton. But to see him hold steady as a top four player among the European skaters, it just kind of surprised me a little bit.
Yeah, I was surprised actually when I'm looking. He stayed right there. He didn't move at all. Which when we saw him move around in our whenever Peter and I have moved, changed our rankings around, he's been moving. So we'll see. I I agree. He's a very talented defenseman. He's going to be a top 4 defenseman in the NHL, but he hasn't played a ton this year, and maybe they're just looking at his talent level and what he could be. I think that's what they're looking at. So
yeah, projectability.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. Let's move to the fun stuff. The risers, the guys that have been impressive and have moved up quite a bit. Peter, start with you. Who has risen up on this list, and for good reason? There's quite a few that have.
Are we starting off with North America or Europe?
Oh, North America. We'll start right.
Okay.
Same format as it is. Sorry.
Okay.
I didn't say that. North American side.
I'm gonna go with my guy, Kevin Korchinski. I mean, was that a shocker? Really? I mean, moving up from 20 to number 7. I mean, there's a very great reason why. I mean, just the dynamicism that he plays with his puck moving abilities, and it's not just the playmaking, it's his reads. He's smart when to pinch up, when to attack. He knows when to back off. Of course, all the young defensemen need to work on some aspects defensively, but he does have an active stick to break up plays. He's very effective in that regard. And you could go back to Will's statement on him last week on his thoughts on him as well, and I totally agree with his sentiments. He has really great potential, and with his size and the way that he's able to move at that pace and to take control of the game, I think it's going to be fantastic. And I think we're looking at someone that definitely deserves to be in that top 10 consideration for this side. And maybe, hey, If a team takes a swing at him in the top 10, so be it. He deserves it.
Korchinski has been riser on a lot of lists before this one came out, so it's no surprise that NHL Central Scouting sees the same stuff. They rose him up too, and for me, watching him in the playoffs, I think he's probably, I think he definitely deserves that bump. In the rankings. So he's going to be good, and we'll see where he falls when the draft gets going. Devin, you have anyone that you're seeing here that rose up a lot that you want to highlight?
Yeah, I'm going to highlight David Goyette, who jumped up from 35 to 13. Holy cow. And I will say on the top here, I don't know if I agree with 13, to be honest with you, but especially considering who he's ranked ahead of right now.
Yeah.
But I do like that he climbed up the rankings a bit. I think that he's a player that has an exciting toolkit. He when he is on his game, he plays a game that will bring you out of your seat. He's a great playmaker. He also can put the puck in the back of the net himself. He's just his offensive IQ is sky high. That's all there is to it. I think he is not the most well-polished prospect in this class, and that's kind of why I'm surprised he's as high as he is. But the potential is there. I think, you just got to watch him a little bit and you can see, what he could be. But to see him as high as 13 ahead of guys like Nazar and even like Rucker McGroarty is like, I don't know about that. But like I said, kudos to Central Scouting for giving him a bump.
100%. I want to highlight, of course, we've highlighted him before on this show. Jagger Firkus.
Yep.
He went from 33 to 12.
Yeah.
That's a big jump. So they saw something, the same thing they saw in that top prospects game and what he's doing in the playoffs here. He's seeing the same stuff. So he deserves that bump. He's now into the first round, according to Central Scouting, and he's now in the first round of a lot of rankings coming out lately. So he's probably gonna be a first round pick when it comes down to it. So Jagger Firkus been really good. Same team as Denton Mateychuk, and so that team have been watching quite closely in the playoffs here. So we'll get to that. We'll talk about the playoffs in a few minutes, but let's move to guys that rose up on the European side that we saw quite a few actually rise up there. Peter, who'd you see? I mean, I know there's a few that I think you're probably going to say.
I'm not going to say because I have a feeling that both of you are going to say them. So I'm going to go a different route. I'm going to say Noah Ostlund. Still sticking with that Djurgården sentiment because I know I have a feeling with Devin. But yeah, Ostlund was just absolutely dynamic at the U18s. I mean, from the beginning of the year, we knew he was a fantastic playmaker and he carries the pace or controls the game extremely well. Soft hands, great vision, but we saw more to his game. We saw him get a little bit more aggressive and heading to the high danger area, attacking the net. And he scored that beautiful goal where he cut it between two USA defenders, gets a shot, and I believe he deflected it in the gold medal game. So to have that drive, have that maintain that pace, that speed at that quick rate, with his IQ, his mindset, his craftiness, you package that all together and you have a first round player. And he's always been in my first round. He dropped a bit last time because maybe it just wasn't as dynamic as I saw him a few times. But in this tournament, he was absolutely dominant. And for him to move up 25 to 18, maybe I could have been happy with him a little bit higher up. But then again, splitting hairs. He deserves a bump in the rankings. And if he's going to be in that late round, a team's going to be very, very happy for him. Needs to put on a little bit more, muscle, can get beat a little bit. But you know what? I'm taking that skill set any day of the week.
Yeah. 100%. So I definitely agree with that one. Devin, you have anyone that rose up that you want to highlight here in the European side?
Well, I feel like we could talk for a good solid 10 minutes about risers in the European side of things because there are quite a few.
Yeah. More than North America.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'll start with Jonathan Lekkerimäki because I think
Knew it.
I think he has to be mentioned, and I figured that's who Peter thought, and it is worth mentioning. Up from 9 up to 6, or from 9 up to 6. I think that like I said a couple of weeks ago, this is a player who already was starting to be part of the national, international conversation when it comes to top prospects in this draft. But I think that his rise in this ranking kind of reflects it. I think he's going to be a top 10 pick. I really, really do. But the guy I actually really want to highlight here is defenseman Mattias Havelid, who jumped up from 43 to 19. So he's an undersized defenseman. He's listed at 5'9", 165. And I think that for him to actually become an NHL player, that's going to be something he has to address. He's got to put on some weight, put on some muscle. He's going to be dealing with some big dudes in the NHL if he gets to that level. But he's got a really well-rounded game. He moves the puck really well, which is what you want from a undersized defenseman. I think he plays a smart game. He doesn't overcomplicate things. I think that honestly, the biggest concern with him is whether or not he would get out-muscled in the, with tougher competition. So I think, and that's something that he can control. That's something that the team holding his development or controlling his development can take care of as well. So I think good for him for jumping up as much as he did. I know Alexa, who we had on a month ago or so, is probably really excited about that.
Yeah.
And he's a name to look out for. I would not be surprised if he ends up being kind of an early second rounder that maybe kind of comes out of nowhere and catches guys off guard.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, Havelid, I saw that too. He rose up quite a bit, and definitely deserved because Alexa was one that mentioned him on that episode. So she saw into the future, I guess.
Yeah.
So mine is a couple guys from the Czechia team that had great under 18s. You can probably tell the first one is Jiri Kulich.
Yep.
I wrote his prospect profile, came out this morning, and I had a lot of content from his performance at the under 18s because he was dynamic. 9 goals, led the tournament, and he also, 7 of them were on the power play, and some people may point to that. I said that in my profile too. You may point to that as being like, well, 7 were on the power play. Well, you need power play guys in the NHL. You need guys that can score on the power play. And he sure has a great one-timer on that power play. And his club team usually sets him up that way to score. They have set plays around him. So, if he could develop that to be a guy in the NHL that can do that, we can see what the guys like that, Ovechkin, Stamkos, can do on the power play with a shot like that. So, he's also a guy that can score in a variety of ways. It doesn't just score one way. He's really good in the slot. He can do on the rush. There's been pointing to, his strength, and, sometimes his acceleration isn't that good, but, that all can be kind of tweaked. But the way his two-way game, his hockey IQ is something that I think NHL teams will want in their lineup, even if he doesn't become, his ceiling that he could become a second line center. But you need guys like Yanni Gourde and David Boland in your lineup too, and in the playoffs. So he could develop into something like that. So Kulich was one for me, and then Tomas Hamara is the other guy from the Czechia team who was also part of that dynamic power play in that under 18s. He had 8 assists in that tournament, and one game I believe was against Canada. He had 4 or 5 points, I believe, and so he's going to be a heck of a defenseman in the NHL, and so definitely look out for those two. And they both rose up on the rankings here. So Kulich went from 22 to 13, not a huge jump, but then you look at Hamara, who went from 42 to 21, so 21 spots up into probably the first round. Talking about it now, so. Those are 2 Czechia guys, and too bad Czechia didn't get a medal. They got to that round in Finland, kicked them out, and that's where Kulich's goal scoring stopped. But so but he had a heck of a tournament. So both those guys are definitely guys to watch out for in this draft. Yeah, so let's go to just finish off this before we get to our second topic here. This is the biggest part of the show, so the rest of it is not going to be much, but let's talk about guys that should have rose up that never did, or even maybe dropped a bit. We talked about a couple in the fallers, but should there have been someone that could have rose up? Peter, start with you on the European side. Who should have rose?
I see, again, there were so many impressive Europeans, especially lately, that deserved to rise up. It really is difficult to say that who should have rose but didn't, because I'm looking at a lot of names, because that a lot, even names that were like later on or weren't even known, rose up this time around, and it's really hard to try and pinpoint who is very kind of stagnant, really. Yeah. If I'm going to say something, I'm going to say Philip Bysted, just because I got to pick a name really at this point. He dropped from 16 to 17, one spot, still in that range, but maybe maybe didn't quite have the tournament that he did. And again, I'm probably not even answering the question properly, because it really is difficult, because mostly everyone's risen.
Go to the North American side. We'll package these into two.
Yeah.
North America and Europe. I mean, you can bypass one of them if you feel.
Yeah. I'm also gonna say Seamus Casey. He was 32nd, 29th. Maybe he should have risen up quite a bit. I mean, you look at Lane Hudson was fantastic at the tournament. Maybe he deserves to be ahead of him at this point, but to have like some of the names like, not bad at all, but Fraser Minton, Adam Ingren, Jack Hughes, maybe you could have had Casey and Hudson together, because they are just so dynamic in their puck moving abilities. Hudson maybe has that more two-way aggressive style to his game as well. But I would have thought that Seamus Casey would have had, a little bit more of a rise to his game.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, Casey's, again, going to be a great defenseman in the NHL, even wherever he goes in this draft. So, but yeah, he probably should have risen up maybe a little bit, and he never did. So, Devin, you see anyone from both sides that should have risen up? Either side, whatever you want to highlight there.
Well, I'm completely with Peter, where the European side is kind of I think things were pretty much how they should be, more or less. There's people who rose did rise. So going over to North America again, I'm looking at two guys here. One is kind of the obvious one. Frank Nazar probably should have rose instead of fallen. But alas, here we are. Things don't make sense, and that's how life works. But aside from Frank Nazar, I'm actually going to say Danny Zilkin. Talked about him a little bit over the past month or two, and he went from 27 to 35. Now, I wasn't expecting him to like make a huge leap or anything, but I was expecting him to maybe jump up a few spots, and instead he dropped a few spots. So it's interesting to see that basically Central Scouting doesn't put a ton of stock into that top prospects game, apparently. And I mean, you shouldn't, it's one game, but there is something to be said for it. Zilkin and Nazar kind of stood out to me as maybe players that should have rose. Nazar more than Zilkin, but they did not.
Yeah, I agree with both sides. I mean, the thing is, Europe's really hard to pick because there's so many guys that rose, and probably some that maybe, like you said, Bysted, maybe he didn't move that much. But yeah, European was harder, was more difficult to pick out. But North America, I agree with that. Nazar is one of the biggest ones for me that probably should have either stayed there or moved up, like we said at the beginning of the show. So, but it's a great discussion point to talk about, to whenever these rankings come out. And that's what we do whenever we have Peter's come out, mine come out, and Andrew's come out too. So we kind of pick it apart. And that's what we do with NHL Central Scouting too, which is, it's fun to do. So we'll see where everyone falls and goes on draft day. And that's where it gets really exciting to see what team gets who, is that's ultimately what matters, is where they rank these guys and what the teams do, because they're the ones that pick them. So before we move on to a quick discussion on the CHL playoffs and some questions of the week, just wanted to reset the show here and just remind you that this week's show is brought to you by the Hockey Writers Sports Betting Guide, brand new source for your daily sports betting odds, lines, props, and futures, as well as some daily fantasy strategies and analysis. Make sure you're following THW Bets on Twitter and Facebook. Get the latest on everything sports betting. Of course, if you decide to bet, please do so responsibly. If you or anyone you know has a problem with gambling, please check out those resources in the description below. There's some great stuff on those two websites there, so definitely check that out. Let's move on to the CHL playoffs. Let's do a quick discussion here, which is going on right now. The QMJHL just started their first round. They're a couple games in. And then the Dub and the OHL have on to their second round of play. So there's quite a few prospects that have stood out. Instead of focusing on the draft, let's focus on in general. I mean, you can pick a guy that's going to be drafted, but in general, who has stood out in these playoffs that have kind of burst onto the scene or just, continued their strong play? I kind of want to highlight Devin. We'll start with you. Who has kind of, come out and said, come to play in the playoffs, which is probably the most important time of the year?
Well, I mentioned him before we started recording, and we talked about how the Edmonton Oil Kings were probably a team to look out for in these playoffs in the WHL, and they were going to have to rely on their goaltender, Mr. Sebastian Cossa, to deliver the type of goaltending that made him the 15th pick in the 2021 draft. And by golly, he's given it to him. He's got 2 shutouts through 5 games, a 1.2 goals against average, and a .946 save percentage. I'll take that any day of the week. And that's like, that's kind of what we expected. And, we said this recently. Cossa didn't have the kind of season that people were maybe hoping for out of him. He was good, but not great. And for a guy drafted 15th overall, you want great, especially considering Jesper Wallstedt was, ranked ahead of him by most people into that draft, and he was drafted after Cossa. But here we are in the playoffs, which is when it's time to show up, put up or shut up, and Cossa is putting up. And this is, as somebody who covers the Red Wings, this is what you want to see. This is, you can be good in the season. That's all you need to be is good. But when it's the playoffs, when that's when your legacy is cemented. So it's good to see Cossa play up to his potential. And like I said, as somebody who covers the Red Wings, you're feeling a lot more confident of the crease in Detroit based on his play through these first 5 games.
Yeah. Well, we were saying before the playoffs began that Cossa wasn't that. I mean, he was okay. He was good during the regular season. His numbers weren't horrible, but he's come to play in the playoffs, and that's, like you said, that's the best time to do it, because that's where you make your, especially once you're in the NHL, that is what wins cups is goaltending. You need a good goaltender to win, and if he can become that for the Red Wings in the future, I think they're going to be pretty happy with it. Peter, who do you have in the playoffs that's kind of stood out to you as they've stepped up their game in the most important time of the year?
I am going to shout out a player that I've talked about quite a bit on here. I am going to go with Brendan Othman from the Flint Firebirds. Very critical player in that series against the Osaon Attack. Went 7 games. And also, in his first game against the Sioux Greyhounds, he has already, got a hat trick in that game. So for him to, I'm just going to pull up the full stats here. If I could try and find him, I don't know where he is. Sorry, 4-point game, not a hat trick. He had 1 goal and 3 assists, but, to have that kind of production in the game in the second round, to be that consistent, and also shout out to Sam Stern, who's a big fan of Brendan Othman. I've been raving about Othman in his draft year, wrote his profile, always thought of him as a 15 to 20 overall pick. Rangers got him at 16, got a really great, intense forward with a goal scorer mindset in Othman. I think he's just been absolutely dynamic, and he's been critical for them to get to this point in the semifinals. So here's a hoping he can continue that, because, obviously the Rangers already have a really deep prospect pool enough as it is, and Othman just rounds that up.
Well, we know how much you like. Again, you know how much you like Othman. Talked about quite a bit about him. So he's going to be, again, the Rangers are an up and coming team with their youngsters, and he just adds to it. And he's going to be really good for them. For me, it's Zack Ostapchuk, who plays for the Vancouver Giants. Had a heck of a first round series against the Everett Silvertips. I mean, a team that the Giants should have been just swept away by, but they weren't. They beat them. And Ostapchuk and a guy who's I'm going to talk about in the prospect of the week, I won't say his name yet, but both of those guys, they're a dynamic duo. They sure ran over them. They're having probably going to have a tougher time against the Kamloops Blazers here. They're down 1-0 in their series already here. But the Everett Silvertips, that was a heck of a team that was first in the West, and they took them out. So, and he was a big part of that. So Ostapchuk was a huge driver of their offense, and Ottawa Senators have another good player in their prospect pool that I don't think anyone expected, because he was I believe he was an overager in the draft when he was drafted, and he was drafted quite high from what I remember. So, I mean, it's great to see him perform in the playoffs. So Ostapchuk for me has stood out quite a bit in the WHL playoffs so far here. Let's look back at our predictions so far here. I mean, it is early. The queue had just started, so it's not really a big thing, but some of them are into the second round. So let's start with the OHL here. Peter, you said the Bulldogs. Well, you said the Bulldogs, but then you didn't make a real firm prediction. So yep. I don't really. But the Bulldogs are still in the playoffs. They're up 1-0 against Mississauga Steelheads in their second round series here. So they're still here. Devin, you're already done. So London Knights, you said we're going to make it and win this championship. They're done in the first round. So you're 0 for 1 so far.
In my defense, I did say the Bulldogs were to be looked at as the favorites. So
there you go. We'll give you that. And then I said the Bulldogs as well. So we're still alive. Devin, you're 0 for 1.
It was a good series.
It was a fantastic series. Yeah, it was fantastic.
Definitely. They're up against the Windsor Spitfires in the next round.
Yeah.
So that's gonna be a heck of a series. Let's move to the WHL. We were unanimous pretty much. I mean, Peter, you did mention Everett Silvertips. They were eliminated by the Giants, but you still were kind of more on the Oil Kings side. Mm-hmm. We were pretty unanimous on that. They're up 1-0 with the Red Deer against the Red Deer Rebels, who got through with that dynamic duo of Archdeep Baines and Ben King, who was really good in that first round. But they're up 1-0 on that. So Oil Kings are still there. So we're all still good. Then going to the queue, which is early. Devin, you said the Remparts, they're up 1-0 against Chicoutimi. I had the Sherbrooke Phoenix up 2-0 against Bay Como. Peter, you said the Charlottetown Islanders, they're up 2-0 against Moncton Wildcats. So we're all on a good direction on that sense.
So you're saying there's a chance. There we go. We're on the same page already.
Very good. So Devin, you're 0 for you're 0 for on one of them, but pretty good. Looking pretty good for the rest. But it was a good prediction. London Knights are always ones to watch, so it's not like it was a horrible pick, and it was a pretty tight series in the end. So it was good. So we'll see how all that plays out once it actually is taken. We'll keep looking back at these predictions as we go. Once the Memorial Cup happens, we'll know where all the championships lie. So we'll talk about that for sure. Just to finish off the show for Prospects of the Week, we'll do our questions of the week, new segment, which we started a few episodes ago. The second edition. This is questions of the week. I added a couple. These are all quick ones. So we'll start with this one. Now that the regular season is over, who is your Calder Trophy winner? And as an extension to that, we know he'll probably not win it. But how many votes will Cole Caulfield get now that he had a monster season, 22 goals to end it, just burst back on the scene, made us not look as bad for predicting that he was going to win. So, Devin, I know you're probably going to say, and I think we're all going to say the same name, but who is your Calder Trophy winner right now? And again, how many votes will Cole Caulfield get?
The German kid's going to win it. And as for Cole Caulfield, I wouldn't be surprised if he finishes like fourth. Like he this is a thing where and we've talked about this before. If he had Marty St. Louis as his coach the whole season, I think he's pushing Cider hard for first place. But alas, that wasn't the case. And like I said, I would not be surprised if he finishes top 5 and like fourth, just outside of the podium.
Yeah, I agree. So there's my Calder Trophy tracker. I made it fourth on that. So we'll see where it all falls. Just a shameless plug there. Peter, who are you picking as your Calder Trophy winner? Is it the same German kid? Starts with an M, ends with an S, or starts with an M, his first name, last name.
Starts with an M for the first name and starts with a B for the second name. Michael Bunting. No, I'm just joking. I'm just joshing. It's got to be more Cider. I mean, there's no other way to look around it. And yeah, Bunting led all rookies in points, but then again, look who he was playing with. I mean, you can still make the argument he is overage, but then again, he's still eligible. So if he wins it, take it up with the NHL, not us. But my vote is for Mort Cider. There's no doubt about that. The minutes, power play, penalty kill to do all that and to make history in the making as well. Absolutely fantastic rookie campaign. And I do agree with Devin. I think maybe he should get some votes. I mean, he finished 6th overall in rookie scoring, considering where he was at the beginning, went back to Laval in the AHL, tried to find his game, still struggled. And then as soon as St. Louis came in, boom, the goals started happening. The points started coming. I wouldn't be surprised if he does get some votes. Maybe not a lot as we would like to have hoped, because we thought he was a favorite at the beginning of the season. But yeah, he deserves some recognition because the way that he finished off was just absolutely on fire.
Yeah, well, I mean, he had 21 or so, something like that after St. Louis took over, which I mean is insane if you translate to that over an 82 game season. So he's a 30 goal scorer plus if he has that over a whole season. So he would have pushed Cider hard for that trophy for sure. And so again, made us look better that he definitely turned it on. And if they would have changed coaches earlier, we may have seen that. But you never know. We'll never know. I mean, Caulfield's going to be a heck of a player. He is a heck of a player, not will be. He is. So I don't think Montreal cares if he doesn't win the Calder. They're just happy that he's back. So he's a legitimate piece of that puzzle in Montreal that's a little bit all over the place right now. Let's move to something. This is way too early Calder predictions for next season. There's going to be quite a few rookies entering the NHL that have played played already this year. Devin, you're early, way too early, obviously way too early Calder prediction for next year.
I am going to go with Matty Beniers. And the reason why I'm going to go with Matty Beniers is because of how effective he has been with the Kraken to close out this season. We talked about this a week ago or whatever, where the Kraken haven't been that great at filling the net this year, or they weren't that great at it if they're done playing. But Beniers was at like a point per game. Second overall last year, obviously we know that, and with that comes expectations, and he's risen up to them so far. And I think that I will say this way too early, so this is quite the hot take, but I would not be surprised if the Calder winner next year isn't super dominant. Like, I don't think we're going to see like a crazy year out of the Calder winner. Cider was dominant in certain ways. His point totals don't jump out at you like they maybe would other years, but he's been dominant in other areas. Whereas I think the Calder winner next year just kind of is like a really good player and didn't dominate, but really made a name for themselves. And I think that kind of fits into Matty Beniers' wheelhouse, because I do think teams will catch on to him. I would not be surprised to see him struggle for, short length of time over the course of next season. But I think giving Seattle a top center to build around and, showing that he is that right away, I think that he's going to put up a lot of points, and I think he's going to legitimize the Kraken as a threat. in the Pacific Division. Maybe not a playoff team, but a threat. And I think that's all you can want from a franchise centerman.
I definitely agree with Beniers, that Beniers pick. I have a different one, but I'll let it end. Peter, who's your way too early Calder Trophy winner for next year?
Yeah, again, very difficult. But if I had to pick one right now, I'm going to pick Mason McTavish.
That's a good one.
And mainly because he started off the season on that 9-game tryout, looked really good, dealt with a few injuries, but, he looked really good in the 9-game stint. Obviously, still needed to grow a little bit. Teenager coming up, he still looked really great. Had a stint in the AHL, still looked really great. And he's played at every single level, junior, senior, Olympics, World Juniors, everything. And the fact that he's been able to do all this and play this much hockey at this many different levels, I think he's going to be ready to, take a major step forward next season. And also with, Ryan Getzlaf retiring, this opens up the door of possibilities. Obviously, you're probably going to think that Trevor Zegras might be taking over that number one spot on the first line. Because let's face it, Zegras, Terry, and maybe if you bump up Milano, that's going to be great. But if you give Mason McTavish solid secondary minutes, and he looked even great in a middle six role, I agree with Devin. Maybe the production may not be there, but I think his overall impact, and because the Anaheim Ducks were kind of a bit average this season, more taking a bigger step forward than what we had already imagined, you would think that maybe the mindset is going to be higher next time around, despite losing one of your franchise players in Ryan Getzlaf. So might be leaning on him quite a bit, but I think he's able to handle it and, take advantage of that opportunity.
Mason McTavish, that's a great pick. He had looked so good in his 9-game tryout, and like you say, Anaheim's going to be, my gosh, they're going to be such a good 1-2 punch of Zegras and McTavish and Zellweger on the back end. You got Drysdale there ready. I'm not looking forward to the Canucks having to play that team in the future many times. So, I'll say I'm going to go on the power of Owen Power. I think he's going to be like maybe a big. I mean, Power was the first overall pick, but I think he's going to be a very good, again, like Devin said, it's not going to be a huge point. The winner's not going to be a huge point producer, but I see another defenseman potentially winning it this next year in Power, and the Buffalo Sabres are going to get better. Devin, you're going to mention a guy that's going to probably play full time next in your prospects of the week, so. Spoiler alert, and he's going to be really good. Outside choice. This is a little bit of a bold prediction. He is a little bit older, but and also not drafted. Nick Blankenberg in Columbus. I mean, it may be a bit of a bold prediction to have him win over everyone else, but
the sleeper pick
really good at the end of the season. That's a sleeper pick. He looked really good at the end of the season. He's very dynamic defenseman. He could potentially, even if he doesn't win it, he'll be in the conversation, I think, especially if he can continue it and, play some minutes for Columbus. And we'll see. I think, like you both said, it's going to be a tough class. There's a lot of good rookies that are going to be in the NHL next year. Just like this year, there was quite a few. So it's going to be fun to do the Calder stuff next year as well.
Another player, just real quick, that I want to throw out that I think could surprise some people, 2020 pick, but Marco Rossi.
Yes.
If he makes the Minnesota Wild next year, I think he could make some big noise. So I'd say to keep an eye on him too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also would have liked to have seen if Quentin Byfield didn't play the full 25 games.
Yes.
He would have been my number one. Yeah. Unfortunately, he played 40. He had 10 points in those games, but sad to say.
Yeah, same thing with Matt Boldy. I believe he played too much as well for the Wild, and he looks really good this year. What is he going to be next year when he's been playing more minutes?
Oh God!
Holy crap! And he's been really good where he is now. So, but he's not eligible anymore. He's eligible this year, which he may get some votes. You never know. I mean, someone may pick him to have a couple votes, maybe. Let's move to the last question here. This is a little bit of again, this is way too early to pick this too, but if you could pick one draft pick from this 2022 class coming up play a full NHL season next year, who would it be? We had Cole Sillinger play this year, coming right out of the draft. We had a guy in Arizona. I just remember my name now. JJ Mosier was another guy that played almost all year with Arizona, and he was a 2021 pick. So it can happen. Peter, who you have as someone that could play a full season next year? Maybe not full 82, but most of the season.
Yeah, this is really tough because, again, me personally, you don't want to rush prospects. Then again, if you see someone who's really great, then so be it. I think, and this is just me based on what I've seen, I've been a big fan of Ryan Chesley. I think he's a player that is very sound responsibly, very mature, plays a very mature game, very responsible for, where he's at right now. Right-handed defenseman too. Teams are going to be looking at him already because right-handed defensemen are a premium, rare commodity. I obviously you're not going to throw him to top pairing, top four, because he's kind of in that middle pairing. But at the same time, he could be rotating in and out. He could be on that third pairing. Maybe, again, this is all hypothetical, but I just liked what I've seen in his game. He's very mature, very sound, very confident with his movements and everything that he does. He's very smart with his defensive play. And I think that's why maybe teams may look to try and get him. And again, you develop properly. So I don't want to say, everyone's, I don't want to say because I said Ryan Chesley, everyone's going to say, well, you said Ryan Chesley was going to be great. Well, no, calm down. But he does fit the mold of what you want to look for in a defenseman. So if he's able to do that and still maintain that composure, that poise, that confidence, I really like him to do that.
Yeah, that's a great pick. And again, people are going to come back to this and say, why did you say that? He didn't even make
hypothetical.
It's all hypothetical. This is fun. Devin, who do you have from that 2022 draft class that could potentially play a full season next year?
Well, I'm going to make Peter really happy, and I'm going to say Kevin Korchinski.
I didn't want to say it because I got something else in the works.
But I think Korchinski, the reason why he's such a well-regarded defenseman in this class is because he's a well-rounded defenseman. And I think that if he is with the right team, I don't think he'll play top line minutes. I don't think he should play top line minutes.
No.
Yeah.
But if he is in the right situation where he could play, a bottom pairing role, I think he could play an 82 game season in the NHL, especially if he has a good partner with him. For me, it just comes down to the fact that he's got a well-rounded toolkit. And when you have a good solid base to build off of, I think, again, depending on what team he's with, he could push for that NHL roster spot. So I'm going to go with Korchinski.
Yeah. Again, that's a great pick. I'm going to go and take the low hanging fruit. And I don't want to say Shane Wright, because that's probably something that a lot of people are probably going to say because of his well-rounded game. I'm going to say Logan Cooley.
Yeah.
Cooley is like I've said about him, he's just so well-rounded as a prospect. And again, and looking at guys like Bo Horvat, who didn't play in his draft year, or the year after that. But why he made the NHL so soon is because he was so good defensively and can play on the fourth line, and still be productive, still get enough minutes to develop. And I think Cooley could become even a third line guy.
Yeah.
To start because of his hockey IQ, his well-rounded two-way game. And that's something that, you don't want, again, we said this before, we don't want to rush prospects, but if he can play and develop in the NHL without having, and it's better off he's playing the NHL than being in a lower league, then do it, because you've seen it where guys like Cole Sillinger, he comes in and he's played really, some solid minutes for the Blue Jackets, really good too. And he came right in and played. So, it's not unheard of. It wasn't bad for his development. I think it was probably really good for his development. So I think Cooley has a big chance of being able to be that type of guy for whoever drafts them, which is probably going to be the Coyotes or the Montreal Canadiens. And they both could play a guy like that right off the bat.
Yeah.
So we will see who ultimately picks them and what they do, but I'm picking Cooley to be that guy. let's move on to the last segment of the night day, whenever you're watching this show. Prospects of the week. And I mean, we've alluded to a couple of them. Actually, we alluded to all three throughout the show. Peter will start. No, Devin, we'll start with you. I kind of spoiled it. I didn't say the name, but I think people may have predicted it. Who is it?
Yeah, this is a guy who also should have a chance at maybe winning the Calder next year. That is going to be for Jack Quinn. And the reason why I picked him is because he won the Dudley Garrett Award as the AHL's most outstanding rookie this week. Had a really, really good year with the Rochester Americans. In 45 games, had 61 points. That's insane.
Impressive.
Yeah.
Yes. This is a player who, when the Sabres took him at 8th overall, there was kind of some back and forth discussion on whether or not that was a good pick or not. And I think that his performance this year has maybe silenced some doubters. Seeing him potentially make the Sabres next year, I think he could just spark an offense, a Buffalo offense that is already starting to look like it's developing in the right direction. I think he is going to make some noise for himself next year. We already talked about who could win the Calder next year, but I would be remiss if I didn't say that he has a chance at it too, because had a really, really good rookie season this year in the AHL, and that league is not for the faint of heart. So good on him for delivering on the promise that made him a top 10 pick, and looking forward to see what he can do at the NHL level now.
Yeah, Jack Quinn. Well, that's going to make someone happy in our comments. I believe a few episodes ago is, why isn't anyone mentioning Jack Quinn? Well, we just did. So there's Jack Quinn. I know Greg has mentioned him on the show before. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure he did. So look back at that episode, because he did mention it. Peter, who's your prospect of the week?
I don't think he's made this before, but stop me if you've heard his name before. Kevin Korchinski. I mean, listen, he's all like, looking at the stats that he's had in his rookie season, second in assists behind Olen Zellweger, 3 off from his 64. Korchinski had 61, and he finished 4th overall in points among defensemen. So to have that kind of production in your rookie season, obviously he only had 4 goals. Everyone's going to point to the fact that he maybe can't shoot the puck. Well, looking at his stats right now in the playoffs, he already has 3 goals. He's already close to matching his regular season total in the playoffs in a short amount of time. And obviously the Seattle Thunderbirds have moved on. If Korchinski was able to find that shooting mentality or take a bit more shots on net, he probably could have closed in on Zellweger in terms of like overall points and goals. And to have that kind of production as a rookie, just absolutely phenomenal. So yeah, I'm going to keep that short and sweet. That's why Korchinski is my prospect of the week.
Yeah, it should be called the Kevin Korchinski show, because we've mentioned him, I don't know, quite a few times this episode. So definitely he's deserved of any mentions, because he's been a heck of a defenseman this year and deserved wherever he goes in the draft. Mm-hmm. I think he's going to be, like we've said, I think he's going to be probably top 15 now. It's looking. It could be top 10. Who knows? Definitely deserve wherever he goes in the draft, first round for sure. My prospect of the week is Fabian Lysell, who I did talk about. Well, I alluded to him because he's part of that duo of Zack Ostapchuk that took out the Everett Silvertips, because Lysell was lights out. Lysell, yeah. He had 15 points in that. I believe that whole series. I don't think he scored or had any points in the first game. In the second round, but he has 15 points in the playoffs in 7 games, a +9. And oh my gosh, he was just dominant, and he was really good during the regular season, but turned it on in the playoffs, took out the Everett Silvertips, and Boston Bruins has got a heck of a prospect. I know, again, this is another favorite of Peter's last year at the draft, dropped, I think, way too far. I mean, it was, again, another polarizing prospect, but I think the Bruins have another great guy coming up in their ranks, and We'll see if they trade him away before he gets there. But there was talk that they were going to trade him in the JT Miller deal, which would have been fine with me. He would have been coming to the Canucks, which would have been great. And that may still happen because Miller could still be traded this offseason. So Lysell could be a Canuck, but we'll see. Lysell definitely. I mean, he's been so good in the playoffs. So he's my prospect of the week. That's another show. I mean, I said we were going to go less than an hour, but we didn't. We're still an hour, and I think everyone just seems to. All of our episodes have gone at least that. So
we just love prospects.
On brand. Thanks, Peter and Devin, for coming to the Prospect Corner again and talking prospects like we always do on this show. Thanks to everyone for watching and giving us the love every week and watching the show, because we love talking prospects. We love you guys watching it as well. So we would do that if no one would be watching, but it's great to see people watching us and talk prospects. So thanks so much. We will be, of course, having the prospect profiles coming out on the website. We'll be talking more draft as we go here, getting more writers on talking about their teams coming up, doing another mock draft on the show as well. So definitely look out for that, because Devin, that'll be your first time doing our mock draft.
So excited.
We had Greg on the last one we did, so we will have another one with you. So it's going to be fun. We'll do a random draw and see who we can become GMs of all these teams. So we'll see. That's going to be fun. Thanks everyone for watching. And before we let you go, this week's show is of course brought to you by the Sports Betting Guide, Hockey Writers Sports Betting Guide. Brand new source, not going to be brand new very much longer as we keep going here, but daily sports betting odds, lines, props, and futures, as well as daily fantasy strategies and analysis. Make sure you're following THW Bets on Twitter and Facebook. And also, if you decide to bet, make sure you're doing so responsibly. And if you or anyone you know has a problem with gambling, please check out those resources in the description below. Lots of great resources down there. So check that out. And for Peter and Devin, this is Matthew, and we will see you next time on the Prospect Corner.